imagine a ritual, right? Something so brutal that a living goat is just shoved backward off this jagged desert cliff.
Yeah, it's an intense image.
Right. And its body is literally shattering on the rocks below. And this is all just to cure a city's anxiety. Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's a great topic today.
It really is. We're exploring an excerpt from this fascinating text called Aurora Green, specifically Chapter 2. And our mission today is to, well, unpack the really profound, desperate, and often violent ways that ancient civilizations manage their collective guilt and just the sheer chaos of existence.
Oh, absolutely. The chaos was a very real, tangible fear for them.
Exactly. So we're tracing the evolution of how humanity dealt with its mistakes. We're going to travel from sacred water rites to violently expelling human and animal scapegoat into the wilderness, and then finally arrive at the more revolutionary modern concepts of internalized forgiveness and the voluntary scapegoat.
And, the psychological reality underpinning all of this is really what makes it so compelling. I mean, we're looking at ancient peoples who were just absolutely terrified of losing their connection to the divine.
Right.
Or to the natural order, right. They engineered these incredibly complex systems to physically manifest their psychological need for a clean slate.
Yeah, it's wild. Let's start from the very beginning, though, because before you can deal with the whole society's guilt, you kind of have to deal with the individual, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So the most fundamental element of purification is water. In ancient Greece, they had this concept called miasma. And reading through the source, this wasn't just about having dirt on your hands.
No, not at all.
It was a literal spiritual pollution, right, caused by bloodshed or death or even childbirth.
Yeah, miasma was viewed as this clinging metaphysical contagion. It basically meant your relationship with the gods was fundamentally broken.
Oh, wow.
And you were basically a walking danger to the community. So to fix it, the Greeks practiced lustration or Katharmos.
Right, the cleansing.
Exactly. Water was the primary cleansing force, but the source emphasizes a really strict requirement here. It had to be flowing or sacred water.
Okay.
So at the entrances of temples, you would find these things called perirrhanterion.
Those are the stone basins, right?
Yeah, large stone basins.
No.
And you had to wash your hands or sprinkle yourself before you even thought about approaching the divine space.
And the text says if it was a really severe case of miasma, they just bypassed the stone basins entirely and went straight to the ocean.
Yeah, they needed the big guns.
Right. The flowing rivers, or the salt water of the sea, were believed to, physically carry away the defilement. It actually reminds me of Homer's Odyssey and the whole Greek concept of Xenia, their sacred hospitality.
Oh, that's a good connection.
Because today, when a guest arrives at your house, good hospitality is handing them a fresh towel, offering them a drink, maybe giving them the Wi-Fi password.
Right, the basics.
But in the ancient world, drawing a bath for a traveler wasn't just a polite luxury. It was an existential necessity. You had to physically wash off the chaotic, dangerous miasma of the outside world before that traveler could safely enter the civilized, ordered space of your home.
It was protective. And, we see a beautifully parallel development in ancient Jewish history with the mikvah.
The ritual bath.
Exactly, the ritual bath. The Hebrew word mikvah literally means a gathering of water. And Jewish law, which was later formalized in the Talmud, was incredibly specific about the mechanics of this.
I noticed that. The rules were super rigid.
Very. A valid mikvah had to contain 40 seah, which is roughly 200 to 250 gallons of entirely naturally gathered water, like rainwater or spring water.
And not drawn by human hands, right?
Yeah.
That struck me as a crucial detail in the text.
Yeah, that's the key. The purification couldn't come from human effort. You couldn't just, fill up a tub with buckets.
Right.
It had to come from participating directly in God's natural order. So immersing in a mikvah was about returning to the primordial waters of Genesis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, mystical traditions explicitly compare it to a womb of rebirth. You enter the water spiritually compromised, and you emerge entirely renewed, having kind of temporarily surrendered your existence to the chaotic element of water to just be formed anew.
So we have this beautiful, really serene spiritual concept, but the source text points out this massive geopolitical reality attached to it, right?
Oh, yes.
Because the archaeological record shows an absolute explosion of these mikvah during the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE. Just suddenly these ritual baths are popping up everywhere across Judea.
Right, and the timing of that archaeological explosion tells a very specific story. So around 125 BCE, the Hasmonean ruler John Hyrcanus aggressively expanded Judea's territory.
Okay.
And he forcibly incorporated the neighboring Edomians, the Edomites, into his kingdom. And they were required to adopt Jewish custom.
Which is a huge shift.
Yeah, massive. Now, to understand the average citizen's anxiety, I want you to imagine your country's population suddenly spiking overnight because your king just conquered the wealthy empire next door.
Right, because Edom was historically this massive copper resource.
Exactly. So there was intense economic and political integration happening. Suddenly, thousands of strangers with different histories and customs are walking your streets, participating in your economy, and just entering your society.
So the communal anxiety of, like, who are we now must have just skyrocketed. I mean, how do you forge a shared identity when the borders of your world just vanished?
Right. And that's where the ritual immersion comes in. It became the visible boundary marker.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the sudden proliferation of the mikvah wasn't solely about personal purity anymore. It was really about defining a new shared religious identity during a time of immense national expansion and cultural anxiety.
So water became the great equalizer, but also kind of the gatekeeper of the community. But, as powerful as water is, it has a major limitation. If water washes away an individual's miasma, what happens when an entire city is drowning in collective bad luck?
Right, you can't exactly dunk a city.
No. Like, let's say a plague hits, or the crops fail miserably. You can't just throw an entire city into a mikvah or a stone basin.
Yeah.
The source text suggests you have to, physically evict the bad energy.
Yeah, you move from the passive element of water to the active concept, the scapegoat. The collective needs a vessel.
A vessel to carry it away.
Exactly. So in ancient Athens, they held this late May festival called the Thargelia, which honored Apollo and Artemis. It was basically a spring harvest festival, but before they could safely consume the new crops, they had to purge the city of its accumulated winter evils.
And the first day of this festival was dedicated entirely to catharsis.
Yeah.
They performed the pharmakos ritual, which is, it's incredibly dark.
Very dark.
They would select 2 marginalized people, often outcasts, criminals, or just the most socially vulnerable members of the city.
Yeah.
And the citizens would literally decorate these individuals with strings of figs, physically beat them with branches, and drive them out of the city limits. These human beings became sponges, essentially, soaking up the community's pollution, and were violently expelled to restore the city's luck.
Right. The Greeks utilized human vessels to absorb the communal miasma, but the ancient Israelites, on their Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, they utilized a different vessel.
The goat.
Yes. The Book of Leviticus details this highly choreographed ritual involving 2 identical goats. One was sacrificed to the Lord within the sanctuary, but the other, the designated scapegoat, was set aside for an entity named Azazel.
I have to pause here because, we use the word scapegoat so casually today.
Oh, all the time.
Like, if a project fails at work, someone becomes the scapegoat. It usually means they take the blame, maybe they get fired, or they endure some office gossip. It is a completely sanitized concept.
They're all sanitized.
But reading the source material, the reality of the ancient Yom Kippur ritual is just viscerally violent. The high priest confesses the nation's sins onto this living goat, but it doesn't just, wander off to chew grass in a peaceful meadow.
No, not at all.
The ancient text of Mishnah Yoma 6.6 describes how this goat was led to a steep, jagged cliff in the Judean desert called Jabel Muntar, and it was literally pushed backward off the edge.
Yeah, and the historical texts actually note that the fall was so violent and the terrain so sheer that the animal's body would be torn apart before it even hit the bottom of the ravine.
It's just, why did the ancients feel that the sins of the community had to be so violently physically destroyed?
Yeah.
Why couldn't they just pray for forgiveness?
Well, to understand the violence, we really have to look closely at the name Azazel. It wasn't just the name of a geographic cliff.
Right.
The source references the Book of Enoch, which is an ancient Jewish text where Azazel is identified as one of the rebellious watchers.
These were fallen angels.
Right. Exactly. Fallen angels who deliberately corrupted early humanity. And Azazel's specific crime was introducing dangerous, forbidden knowledge.
What kind of knowledge?
He taught men how to forge weapons of war. So, swords, knives, and shields. And he taught women the art of cosmetics and vanity.
Wait, hold on. Forging swords and wearing makeup.
Yes.
Why on earth did ancient texts lump weapons of war and cosmetics together as the ultimate unforgivable corruption?
Because both are tools of deception and the alteration of the natural order.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, weapons alter the natural span of human life through unnatural violence. Cosmetics, at least in the context of the ancient worldview, were seen as altering the natural appearance to deceive or seduce. Both introduce a synthetic reality.
They shatter innocence.
Precisely. According to the text, the archangel Raphael punished Azazel by binding him and casting him into the jagged rocks of the desert wilderness.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Right, so when the Israelites lead a goat bearing all their sins out into that same rocky wilderness and hurl it down a cliff, they are engaging in a profound cosmic symmetry.
Wow.
They aren't just killing an animal. They are forcefully returning sin back to its chaotic, unrefined source. They're literally throwing human corruption back in the face of the very entity that introduced it to the world.
That completely reframes the entire ritual. I mean, it brings us to a fascinating logistical problem, though.
Which is?
Well, you have this traumatic, violent visual of the falling goat. But if you were an everyday ancient Israelite standing in the courtyards of Jerusalem, miles away from that desert cliff, how do you actually know the ritual worked?
Ah, right.
Like, how do you know your sins are gone? This brings us to what I can only describe as ancient psychological user experience design.
It really was. The priesthood had to solve the user experience of collective anxiety. How do you provide a definitive end to the public's psychological dread?
And they invented the scarlet thread.
Yes, they did.
During the Second Temple period, the priests engineered this brilliant piece of ritual theater. They took a crimson wool ribbon and tied part of it to the scapegoat's horns and part of it to the heavy doors of the temple in Jerusalem.
Right.
And they based this visual on the prophet Isaiah, who said, "Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be as white as snow." So the priests told the anxious masses, when the goat dies in the wilderness and God accepts our repentance, this red thread on the temple door will miraculously turn white.
It provided tangible visual feedback. I mean, a community laden with guilt needed to see a physical transformation to believe a spiritual one had actually occurred.
It was a literal read receipt for divine forgiveness.
That's a great way to put it.
A human-engineered system to manage the terror of an entire nation.
But you know, the source material reveals a chilling plot twist recorded in the Talmud.
Right, this is where it gets crazy.
Approximately 40 years before the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 AD, the thread stubbornly stopped turning white.
Oh my God.
Year after year, despite the ritual being performed perfectly, the ribbon stayed red.
Imagine the sheer panic. I mean, the system you designed to soothe anxiety is now flashing a giant red warning light to the entire population.
Yeah, and the ominous warning of the red thread proved prescient, because the Roman destruction of the temple in 70 AD didn't just burn down a physical building, it created a terrifying psychological vacuum.
Because without the temple, you couldn't legally perform the scapegoat ritual.
Exactly, you couldn't push the goat off the cliff. So where does all that communal guilt go?
Right.
This forced a massive theological revolution. Yom Kippur had to evolve to survive. So it shifted away from animal sacrifice and toward what we recognize today: prayer, fasting, intense personal reflection, and symbolic acts like caparo.
That's where sins are symbolically transferred to a chicken, right?
Yes, or more commonly in the modern era, to money given to charity.
Okay.
The focus moved entirely from a public theatrical shedding of blood to an internalized personal responsibility.
And when Rome destroyed the temple, the trauma was so absolute that Jewel sages couldn't even safely speak the word Rome out loud without risking political execution.
It was too dangerous.
So they had to use a code word. The source notes they started using Edom, the ancient nation of the Edomites we mentioned earlier, as a symbolic moniker for the Roman Empire. They were basically projecting the ancient biblical rivalry between Jacob and Esau onto their current oppressors.
Right. It was a necessary political survival tactic in a deeply dangerous era. But the text emphasizes that Rome and Edom were ethnically and geographically entirely distinct.
Yeah, and if we fast forward to today, the source points out a really unfortunate phenomenon. Modern fringe groups actually strip that ancient survival code word of its satirical context.
Which is very dangerous.
Right. They take this symbolic language like falsely linking Edom to the phrase synagogue of Satan from the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And they wildly misinterpret it to build these extreme racial or genealogical conspiracy theories. They make outrageous claims against modern Jewish populations, alleging hidden Edomite bloodlines.
Yeah, it highlights the danger of weaponizing ancient symbolic language. And the text is resolute in stating that mainstream historians and biblical scholars just entirely reject these claims.
The sources are super clear on this.
Absolutely. Ancient identity in the Mediterranean basin was never about isolated, pure bloodlines. Especially after the conquests of Alexander the Great, the ancient world was a massive, complex web of cultural blending, trade, and intermarriage. So applying modern, rigid, racial categories to Iron Age theology is historically illiterate.
So the physical building breaks down, the goats stop going over the cliff, and the entire ancient system is upended. This historical vacuum coincides with a massive theological revolution regarding the very nature of the scapegoat. The paradigm just flips entirely upside down.
It really does. We arrive at the early Christian concept of Jesus, which introduces the radical idea of the voluntary scapegoat.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Think back to the Greek pharmakos. Those marginalized people were beaten and driven out against their will. The goat at Jabel Muntar was entirely helpless. But Christian theology, particularly as noted in texts like Galatians 3.13, portrays Jesus as willingly accepting the suffering, willingly becoming a curse for the sake of others.
The psychological shift here is staggering. For thousands of years, humans believed the divine order demanded that we punish someone or something to restore balance.
Yes.
But if the divine figure volunteers to be the victim, it reveals to the community that scapegoating isn't about divine justice at all. It's rooted entirely in human fear and human hate.
Exactly.
So by voluntarily stepping into the role of the scapegoat, does the figure of Jesus essentially break the wheel of this ancient psychological need?
That's precisely what the source argues. The victim is no longer the guilty party that the community must righteously expel. The victim becomes the innocent source of reconciliation.
Wow.
When the crowd realizes they are the aggressors, the cycle of blame and vengeance is broken. The focus of religious life shifts from expelling the other to cultivating internal humility and extending forgiveness.
And you can actually see the echoes of the old Greek rituals hiding inside the new Christian practices. The source does a brilliant job mapping the structure of the two-day Greek Thargelia festival onto the timeline of Good Friday and Easter Sunday.
The structural parallels are remarkable. So the Thargelia honored both Artemis and Apollo. Artemis governed the shadows, the untamed wilderness, and sacrifice. She famously demanded the sacrifice of Iphigenia.
Okay.
The source maps this symbolically onto the suffering, sacrifice, and profound darkness of Good Friday.
Then you have the second day honoring Apollo, the god of the sun, healing, prophecy, and the protector of shepherds. He maps perfectly onto Easter Sunday, the triumph of life, the return of light, and the imagery of Jesus as the Good Shepherd.
And the communal practices evolved in tandem. The Greek purification required severe fasting and the trauma of expulsion on the first day, which then culminated on the second day with the offering of the Thargelos.
The first grains of the harvest.
Right. In a joyful communal feast, early Christianity mirrors this journey. You have 40 days of fasting and self-restriction during Lent, which culminates in the abundance of Easter Sunday, featuring communal meals of lamb, eggs, and bread.
So the ancient rhythm of purification followed by restoration remains intact. It just moved from a physical purging of the city to a spiritual purging of the heart.
Exactly.
We have journeyed from washing in stone basins to throwing goats off cliffs to an internalized theology of a voluntary scapegoat. We've watched humanity evolve from violently expelling its wild, sinful nature into the desert to adopting a philosophy of internal integration. And the source text encapsulates this entire massive journey with one of the most bizarre and beautiful mythological creatures I have ever encountered.
The ichthyocentaur.
Yes. Picture this creature. It has the upper torso and head of a human, the powerful front legs and chest of a wild horse, and the massive scaled tail of a giant fish.
It's quite the visual, and the source focuses specifically on figures like Aphros and Bythos, the ancient sea centaurs.
Right.
To understand why this creature is the perfect capstone to our deep dive, you have to look at the three distinct realms it unites. First, you have the human torso, representing intellect, awareness, and civilization.
Okay.
Second, you have the raw muscle and untamed instinct of the wild horse from the earthly realm. And finally, you have the mysterious, deep, subconscious symbolism of the fish from the aquatic realm.
The deep ocean has always represented the chaotic, unpredictable depths of the human mind. Now, if you know anything about regular land centaurs in Greek mythology, they are usually an absolute mess.
Oh, completely.
They represent uncontrolled passion, violence, and the brutal, unwinnable conflict between civilization and animal instinct. They are always getting drunk and ruining weddings.
Right, they're the ultimate party crashers.
Exactly. But the ichthyocentaurs are portrayed completely differently.
They are depicted as calm guides and brotherly protectors. They are said to have helped birth Aphrodite from the sea foam. Yeah, they even rescued Aphrodite and Eros from the terrifying monster Typhon, which was a mythological rescue mission that resulted in the formation of the Pisces constellation.
That's incredible.
They aren't monsters, they are divine lifeboats navigating the chaotic depths.
And the source draws this cryptic, brilliant connection between the ichthyocentaur and the early Christian vision of Jesus. Because just like this sea centaur bridges the human, animal, and aquatic realms to act as a protector, the figure of the voluntary scapegoat bridges the divine and human realms.
It is entirely about the integration of our nature. In the older paradigms, the wild, earthly side of humanity, often represented in biblical texts by figures like Esau, the rugged, hairy man of the wilderness, was seen as something inherently dangerous that had to be expelled.
Exactly like the goat sent to the jagged cliffs.
Right. But the imagery of the ichthyocentaur, paired with the early Christian co-opting of the fish symbol, the ichthys, suggests something wonderfully radical.
Instead of exiling the wild horse to starve in the desert, the ichthyocentaur harnesses its muscle to navigate the deep, unpredictable waters of the human mind.
Beautifully said.
Our primal instincts, our anger, our fierce passions, our deep subconscious fears, they don't have to be destroyed. They don't have to be violently cast out or pushed off a cliff.
No, they can be integrated.
Right. They can be guided toward wisdom and brought into harmony with a higher purpose.
It provides a profoundly hopeful view of the human condition. It tells us that our deepest, most instinctual parts do not have to be our downfall. When brought into balance and illuminated by awareness, they become the very vehicles of our renewal.
Look at the incredible territory you have traversed with us today. I mean, we started in the sacred flowing waters of ancient Greek temples, the mathematically precise Judean Mikvah.
We really covered some ground.
We did. We stood at the brutal cliffs of Azazel, watching an anxious nation hurl its sins into the abyss. We decoded the brilliant psychological user experience design of a scarlet thread tied to a temple door.
The original red receipt.
Yes. And we witnessed the profound historical shift toward a voluntary scapegoat. A shift that taught humanity to integrate our wild, untamed nature rather than expelling it in fear.
And, the relevance of this ancient history is actively operating in your own psychology today.
How so?
Well, the next time you find yourself scrubbing your hands in the sink a little too vigorously after a highly stressful, toxic day, or the next time you feel that sudden, intense, almost overwhelming urge to blame a colleague for a collective mistake just to save your own reputation.
We've all been there.
Right, but pause for a moment. Recognize that you are feeling the ancient echoes of miasma. You are feeling the gravitational pull of the scapegoat ritual.
You're standing at the edge of the cliff looking for a goat to push.
Exactly.
It is human nature to want an easy out. But maybe, armed with this knowledge, we can choose to harness the wild horse instead. Which brings me to one final, provocative thought to leave you with today.
I love this one.
We talked earlier about Azazel, the fallen angel, who was cast into the jagged rocks because he taught ancient humanity dangerous knowledge.
Right. Specifically, he was blamed for accelerating human chaos by introducing the technology to forge weapons of war and the deception of cosmetics.
The ancients blamed him for introducing the specific tools that shattered their societal peace. So here is my question for you to mull over. If an entity like Azazel were to descend today, right now, what modern forbidden knowledge or new technology do you think ancient texts would blame him for introducing to cause our current societal chaos? Think about it. Until next time.